Now, here's more of the Mike Buck Show on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
Okay, so I was listening to Tizo Brain a little while ago. Say, well, it's a typical commute. It might be about an hour from... I said an hour. I mean, it's like old dark 30 when I come here. And there's like three people on the road. There's a policeman. There's a guy going home from, cleaning up the bar. And there's morning radio guys. As my friend Bill Brennan will attest to, he's here with us. I will say a little chat hello to him in the morning. But right now, it's also time to talk to Andy Robbins. He is the executive director and CEO of HART. And in our studio, we do a program. It's called Heartbeat, figuring that you need to be up to speed on all that. It was kind of clever. And, it is the beating of the heart. And the beating of the heart's been going pretty well. Last couple weeks ago, Andy, when you were here, we were talking about the first part of the big audit that was done. And I know that subsequent from last time to this time, there's been even more of parts of this released. At the city end of it, are we kind of wrapped up with that audit now?
The city audit is wrapped up.
But more state?
There'll be more state, yes.
Okay, so I know that there's been a tremendous amount of stuff that's come out about this. And you actually, the contracts that were let out, I know that they were under big... What was the biggest benefit of having this done as a tool?
The audit itself?
Yeah.
Well, the second part has to do with our current operations. And there were two key findings, I suppose. One had to do with our use of what the auditor called consultants. Mm-hmm. These are really transit experts from other parts of the country or world that we need to fill out our staff to be able to manage this project. So they're like secondments or embedded employees in our organization.
Were they fair?
Well, on the one hand, we need these experts. We can't build a major project like this without having significant experience. Personnel.
You know what? Let me tell you. Let me interrupt to the point where I think that everybody would have to agree. No matter what you think about the current administration, the president, and the cabinet, and everybody else, round peg, square hole is always been some of the things that you get, right? I mean, whether it's cronyism or, somebody is, this guy was a big contributor, so he can come in and do this or that. And it happens throughout it. Isn't that a very dangerous thing to have happen in a body like HART, to have people around that are there because they know somebody rather than they can do something?
Exactly. We need to have people that are experienced in executing a project like this. And for me, it's a balancing act because it is more expensive to bring in experts from other parts of the country or around the world. You have to relocate them. We have a high cost of living here. So we have, out of a staff of about 140, we have 18 of these consultants. So I don't believe it's excessive. I think it's always a balancing act. The number will go down in the future as we continue to finish portions of the project.
Well, let's face it. Yeah. Let's face it. The fact that they are experienced, you call them whatever you want to, but I mean they bring things that worked, or by the same token, they bring in something that doesn't work.
Well, that we want to make sure that we get
that's what I'm
right
getting at. You have both. You have the good and the bad. You get somebody saying, well, they did this where I was there and it didn't work, and here's what they did to fix it. Let's see if we can avoid it at this end.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, so that being said, I'm sure you've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of these guys and gals and say, hey, look, that just happens. You still need to do your job.
Exactly. Now, what the auditor pointed out is that we should manage them in a more efficient way. I have them in a traditional org chart where they report up eventually to me. But what the auditor pointed out is we should also have a more robust evaluation process for the company itself that these people work for and for the individual. So we're going to put those measures into place.
Phil said, please explain, did they become employees of HART in HART offices, or were they being retained for their expertise some other way? Good question. What do you mean?
We have a mix. We have something like 120 city employees. Mm-hmm. They work, they get a city paycheck and they work directly for HART. And we have 18 of these employees that come through a company called HDR. So the paycheck is HDR.
Which means?
But on a daily basis, they wear a hat that says HART.
Yeah.
They report up into our organization up to me.
You know, I'm guessing, and maybe you can explain this a little bit based on your previous experience, and say that, you know, all of these projects that we're talking about take a long time. And during that time, people got to eat. So there's a lot of employees. There's no revenue.
That's
you know,
right.
I mean, there's no money coming in, no fares, no flags going down, occupied, boom. It's just money, money, money.
No, this is a major capital project, and we have to execute the project.
Okay, so now I think that maybe what did you learn from the first part of the audit when we talked a couple of weeks ago?
Well, the first part was more of a historical account of what happened essentially prior to 2016 on this project. Mm-hmm. So, you know, for us, that provides lessons learned. You know, the best way to procure contracts, things like that. I think it informs us going forward on what worked, what didn't work.
Yeah, that's what I kind of got out of it. In other words, what they looked at is stronger, you know, oversight of things, right?
Yes.
And that doesn't that, in fact, all of a sudden turn. You know, maybe you can explain something else. An audit is not a dirty word. I know that a lot of times people look forward to having somebody with fresh eyes look at something to say, hey, how come this is going on? And then you, the boss, could say, you know, that's a good point. It's not going to go on anymore. We're going to fix that.
That's right. That's right. And for example, the city audit is pointing out perhaps a better way to classify some of our city employees, and we're going to be looking into that with the auditor. So
one of the things that always comes up, and I know, Andy, that you and all of the administrative staff and everybody, your targets. I mean, everybody, that rail thing, I'm going to get this guy. What do you hear from others in the community? I mean, you know, you have a lot of people that are waiting either for the HART construction to get out of their face and get on with things and move somewhere else. And then once their space has been, you know, left, or they get it back and say, hey, that wasn't so bad. Now look what we got. What are you hearing from everybody else?
Well, you know, I think in general, you know, what's always in the newspaper is the history of the project being well over budget and over schedule. And, you know, for 2 years now, we've been on our budget. We haven't increased our budget at all, and we're moving forward with the project. But by and large, what we hear from the public is, when is it going to be finished?
Yeah, when can I ride the thing?
Yeah. How much is it going to cost to ride? You know, where does it go?
By the way, we got two how much is it questions this morning. Based on that, who makes the decision and how is it made? Well, based on what?
The fare?
The fare.
Well, the city has a rate commission that will look into that issue and make recommendations to the city council.
Okay, so these are the same people who look into, say, bus fares,
Correct.
handy van, all of this stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's not something said by you.
No, it's not.
But wouldn't they use a lot of your thoughts to be able to formulate what a ride's going to cost and therefore how much they can charge? And maybe you can also explain that no matter what happens in any municipality, is there anywhere where it isn't subsidized?
Well, the first part of your question, yes, we've already appeared in front of the rate commission at least twice, and will appear in front of them more than that to inform them on the cost of operations, on how we're going to operate the train and so forth. So, yes. But, you know, most rail transit systems around the world, or public transit systems, are subsidized.
And heavily, many of them, right?
Yes, but they're, you know, in Vancouver, British Columbia, the rail system actually has an operational surplus.
So this is maybe why we should tell the boo birds to fly away. The number of times people looked at that system, because there were a lot of people who came out and said, yeah, well, you know, it's got an environment of 6 million people, so you can't compare it to Hawaii. It's not a matter of comparing it. Isn't it a matter of showing, here's how they made a system work and not cost more than it should?
Right, and I think, you know, what's in Vancouver, what's driving good revenues for the system is high ridership, and what's driving high ridership is the operation itself. It's a driverless operation. The trains come very frequently. There's no schedules to consult. You just show up and a train comes. And that's essentially the same service we're going to be offering here.
What do you look like on a typical day as far as number of trains? I mean, you must. I do know that that's going to be dependent on ridership, and you'd put more on as you needed them. But what are we going to start with?
Well, what we're going to start with in our interim service in 2020, we intend to open up the first 10 miles of the project.
Which, by the way, my friends, not that long away. Remember, 2020 used to seem like a long time ago. This is 2019. It's not going to be that long.
Less than 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's our target, and we're very focused on that.
Okay.
And we'll have about 4 trains operating, and the service will be less than 10 minutes between trains.
That's fabulous. Yeah.
But when we get to full operations in 2025, in other words, to Alamoana Center,
then you're going to need
we're
more
going to be
trains.
every 5 minutes. We're going to have a train during the peak period. So we have 20 trains that we're taking delivery on, and 17 out of 20 will be operating during the peak service.
Now, people say, this one guy says that he sees them every now and again. What's going on right now? I too have seen, there's a train. Wow, look at that. What are they doing?
They're doing testing right now. And for this type of technology, really any technology, but this driverless technology, we have a very extensive testing program. And you'll see those trains under test for quite a while. As we mentioned, we're about 2 years away from interim service. We'll be testing right up to the time that we open. I'm glad you said that. I want to digress for just a minute, because one of the things that, is the hardest is to wait. And, we in the general public, we want to know what's for lunch today, and you're talking about what's for lunch way down the road. So what are the factors that will determine, forget the fares, because I know that you're out of that, but your input's going to be key. I mean, the decision makers are going to say, this is what they're delivered. This is what it's going to cost. Yes, and, we're working very closely with the City Department of Transportation Services, focused on that interim service. And we want to make sure we have even though it's only the first 10 miles and it's an interim service, it's not our full service, we want to make sure that it's a very good service and people will be attracted to it. So
I don't think people have the concept yet, but they're going to be able to, sign up for whatever they want, whether they want some handy van, some bus, some train, whatever they want. It's going to be maybe seamless. Maybe we don't understand how easy that is to do, particularly with technology today.
Right, and that's the goal, and we're working on what's known as the Holo card, which is the smart card. Yeah. And you'll be able to use the Holo card and transfer from bus to rail. And I would even suggest the Beaky Bike would be part of that in the future.
That would be terrific. More coming up. Andy Robbins, the CEO and Executive Director of HART, is in the house. It is Heartbeat. You can join us by dialing in at 1-833-296-TALK. That's 1-833-296-8255. Or like Mary just did, and we'll get to her in a minute, the Mike Buck Show at gmail.com.
Now, back to the Mike Buck Show on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
Okay, so every now and again, a piece of bumper music sneaks in. He said, where did that happen? It's called All About the Money. For the love of money. Okay, so it's Heartbeat. And every couple of weeks we get together with Andy Robinson, the CEO and Executive Director of HART, talk about the progress and the excitement going forward to 2020 when we roll. And I just was thinking during the break there, Andy, if you don't mind, and we talked about the employees before. They're out there, they're at their softball games, they're at the concerts, they're doing all of these things. And somebody says, hey, what are you doing now? Oh, I'm with HART. Oh, HART! Talk about maybe some of the things that you hear, and both some of the things that are positive and some of the things that your folks love to be able to tell people that they were not 100% accurate in what they're thinking, because here's how it works.
Right, and it's interesting because some of our employees maybe a little bit shy to say who they work for, but I would say by and large, they wear their shirt, they wear their lanyard, and they're quite proud because they're proud to work on a project that's so important to the island.
Well, I can dig that. When you said shirts, I know the same thing. If you're wearing a shirt, Bill Brennan's here. If you're wearing a shirt that says HART, and you get a shaka sign from somebody, Bill, that must be a lot better than the single finger salute, But isn't it true, Andy, that when you think about these kind of things, that it makes a big difference? The perception and the reality. Is it getting closer? Because I knew that there was so much misinformation before. Are people starting to, quote, get it because they see progress?
I think so. And, of course, the project went well over budget and beyond schedule. So that's a history that we just have to live with. We can't change that fact, but what we can change is the way that we go forward. Mm-hmm. So we're working very hard to live within our means. And for 2 years now, as I mentioned, we haven't changed the budget.
Yeah, so, isn't it also, let me make sure that people understand this, that most of the decision makers today weren't there a while ago. In other words, a lot of the things that went on a while ago, it's hard to say whose fault there was. Where are these? They're gone.
Well,
there's been a lot of changes.
In the HART leadership, that is true. I think, my immediate predecessor, Krishna Murthy, when he came in 2017, he saw the need to put in a more robust risk management program, cost control program, those type of management techniques, and I picked right up on those. Yeah. And we're seeing the fruits of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it takes a while, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, so now when you get the project is well underway now, there still are people that are saying, well, what about maglev and what about all of these things? We are done with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, our mandate is to build, what we're building. We really, if there was a major change in technology now, it would have to go through a regular public process, just like the technology that we are building now did several years ago.
So there was no one particular technology over another for any other reason, but what makes the most sense? Explain that. Why do we end up with this system?
Well, I know several years ago when the city was debating the project, there was a technical forum that was brought in. Experts were brought in from other parts of the country or world, and they looked at all the different technologies, and they made a recommendation to the city leaders. And then, as I understand, it was put out to a public vote.
I remember those days,
And essentially the driverless steel wheel on steel rail technology was the one that was chosen.
One thing that has happened really differently, and I know that maybe you can explain this a little bit, is I remember in the very beginning when a lot of the bluebirds said, well, how is it going to get, where's the power going to come from? Well, the power is going to come from HECO. And, this was a deal that was struck 30 years ago when we first started talking about rail being electric. What about the progress that has been made in the technology that produces our electricity? How does that work hand in hand with HART coming along and being able to be assured that HECO can give them all the juice they need?
Right. Well, we've been working with HECO as a full partner for many years now, and of course, having enough capacity in the energy delivery system is essential to the project, and we know that we're there. We have the capacity that we need, and they have their mandate through state legislation to be 100% sustainable by 2045. So as that goal is reached and the percentage of sustainability increases over the years, the rail project is going to benefit from it.
It's kind of exciting to realize that we have increasing demand and maybe an increasing ability to have other than fossil fuels in the environment.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we have a program to look at our stations and incentivize our contractors to install.
I was going to say there's going to be a few panels on those stations. We hope, and that's why Mary said earlier, have we crossed the bridge already with regards to the cost of running this? Remember a few weeks ago there were a bunch of stories in the paper about how much it was going to cost that it wasn't reported. Are we satisfied now that we know what this is going to end up costing at the end of the day? I'm guessing on time, on budget is what you're talking about now.
Well, the budget that was established over 2 years ago was a total cost of about $8.1 billion, excluding finance costs. And we go through this risk management program, and on a monthly basis, we estimate within a certain confidence level, 80, 90% confidence level, our ability to make that budget. And so far for 2 years, the science is telling us that we'll finish at or below that budget.
One of the things that I don't know if we talked about last time, but we had a couple of people ask me, and I'm also inquisitive myself about this, and that is we are all tied to this thing, the prime rate. And as long as things are good right now, the interest is pretty good, but we don't have any way to determine what's going to happen down the road. But doesn't that affect everything, not just HART or rail, but, based on the cost of borrowing money? What does that have to do with the cost of the project? Everything, it seems.
Well, it's part of the cost of the project. We have our sources of funds, which are GET, TAT, and a little bit of city funding. But to meet our cash flow needs, we do have to borrow. And
as long as you got a good borrowing rating, that's good. Right. And as long as you have a good borrowing rate, that's good.
Right.
But I mean, I can remember when mortgages were in double digits.
Right.
You know, and people still bought homes reluctantly, but they still bought homes. Right. And which means also that they're going to have to, this project at where it is now has to be completed no matter what the cost.
The project has to be completed, and we're getting to the point where we're getting closer and closer to the completion date. So the borrowing is more of a short-term borrowing at this point. Andy
Robbins and I will be back after a short news break. It's Heartbeat. If you'd like to be a part of it, like Mary just was, drop me a line, the Mike Buck Show at gmail.com. We're going to talk more about the audits, what's left. As you heard earlier, the state audits are about done, but the cities aren't. We'll talk about that and more when we come back.
Want to join the conversation? Call us toll free. It's 1-833-296-TALK. That's 1-833-296-8255. Now, here's more of the Mike Buck Show on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
Okay, so we know it's Monday morning. Monday. It's time to register your heartbeat. So good. Not that your heart doesn't beat kind of fast on a Monday because it's back to work. Monday. But if you were working for HART and you had a heartbeat issue, it is no game for those that are weak at heart. Andy Robbins, the executive director and CEO, is here. We were talking last time, a couple of weeks ago, about the first part of the federal audit. There's now the second part of the federal audit. We're kind of done with that and looking now for the city audit. So maybe first of all, Andy, you can explain why there were two audits in the first place. An audit's an audit, but didn't, because of the relationship, there have to be everybody looking at it, and how come?
Well, again, I think because of the history of the project, the city council wanted to mandate an audit, so that's where the city audit came from. But then on the state side, when the special session of the legislature was convened in summer of 2017, that special session authorized the additional funding to finish the project to Ala Moana. But as a condition of providing that funding, the state legislature also wanted an audit as well.
I heard, and maybe you can explain this too, and Don has got a similar question to mine, and that is, simply speaking, it is a city project, but in the long run, isn't the state responsible to make sure everybody gets paid? Can you explain that? Because, I mean, the city and most of us, when you say, well, city and state, it's the same pocket. I mean, it's still coming out of my wallet. I mean, so how does that work, that the state becomes responsible if, in fact, if the county is not able to meet obligations?
Well, the state authorizes the use of GET and TAT,
okay,
and then the city enables that tax. Mm-hmm. It's really a municipal project, but due to the special session, the state wanted to insert itself in a little bit more into the management of the project. So the state does a review of invoices that we receive from our contractors and pay. When we pay our contractors, we have to submit the invoices for review to the Department of to DAGS.
Yeah. Maybe you can also explain that, because real property taxes drives the city bus. Excuse the expression, not the real city bus, but real property taxes drive just about everything for us. How important is it to understand where the money comes from out of real property taxes to HART?
Right. Well, the GET is our primary funding source, and that's levied mostly on Oahu taxpayers. So Oahu taxpayers have been paying
certainly
for the majority of this project.
Right? And there are some that are saying, make the tourists pay for it. And we do know that you can only ask the tourists to pay so much. You mentioned earlier, everybody's going to start looking for money, whether it be, the real property tax or your state income tax or that TAT, which is a pretty fragile thing, isn't it?
Well, there's projections, and we use the official projections from the state on these taxes to make our financial plan. But, the visitors pay GET too.
Of course
I
they
think,
do. Yeah.
It's a mix, and they'll be benefiting from the transit system as well. So I think that's a good deal for taxpayers.
That maybe should not be overlooked, because there are many, many people that come from other places that are used to public transport, and they're not going to understand why you, for much longer, why you can't get to Honolulu International and go wherever you need to go.
Right. And I was in the Bay Area when the extension of the BART system opened to the airport
That
there.
must have been something else.
And I think the ridership was far greater than they expected, because a lot of the overseas visitors, for example, they immediately look for a rail connection. They're used to that.
And but not only that, but they actually had to configure some of the vehicles. They had to order more trains, because when a lot of people get on, they have luggage and stuff,
Right.
That being said, there's another thing. I know this comes up all the time. This one comes up from, this is Billy Bike, a bike rider. What about bikes on the train?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to encourage that. We want an intermodal system that includes bikes. There are provisions for bike storage on the train, or you can stand with your bike. There'll be bike storage in the stations as well. So that's to us a very important component. And as I mentioned earlier, the smart card, the Holo card, I think the planners are already starting to look at integrating the Beaky card into the Holo card.
Yeah, that's really cool. And there's another thing, too. I mean, obviously, if you're a biker and you want to comment, call 1-833-296-TALK, 1-833-296-8255. Every now and again, I've seen a bike rider disappointed because the bus already had as many bikes on it as it could.
Right.
And so that's not very many. And so the same thing applies. Remember, last time you were here, we had a couple of calls from people who were disabled, and the ability of the stations to be compliant and how the trains work. And you said it's one level. In other words, when the train door opens, if you're on a chair or something, you roll from one surface to the next seamlessly.
That's right. It's level boarding, and we're going to have a 4-car train, so there is quite a bit of room for bikes, for example. And worst case, if there's excessive bikes on one train, 5 minutes later in the
there's
peak
another
period, another train is coming.
And this is the good news. But there's another thing. When people come on, say, in a wheelchair, is their wheelchair going to have a spot that it goes to, because they're going to stay in their chair?
That's correct. There's special spots designated for wheelchairs. Yeah.
How fast does it go? Phil says, please ask your guests how fast the train travels. It's not the bullet train, but it is pretty quick.
The top speed is 55 miles
Whoa,
an
that's
hour.
pretty good.
Yeah.
If you're in traffic right now, you're not going that fast, are you? Are you surprised? Look, I know you hear all the questions all the time, but isn't that an interesting one? I mean, particularly if you say, look, if you get on this train later, you're going to be waving at a lot of cars as you pass them.
Well, I think in the morning and the afternoon commute, that's very possible.
And when you say that in the morning and the afternoon, how many hours a day will the train operate?
I believe we're looking at about 20 hours a day once we're up and running full service.
So maybe you're talking about being shut down from, like
1 in the morning to about 5 in the morning.
In other words, where there would be limited or no ridership. Right. And would that also facilitate less trains? I mean, as the evening goes on, people go home from work. Why do you need 4 trains going when you could get by with 2 or 3?
Well, the beauty of the driverless system is we can adjust the service levels almost on the fly. We don't need drivers to go out and move trains around. So during the peak, we can increase service. During the off-peak, we can decrease. I'm glad you say that, because a guy, the day after you were here last time, he asked me, he said he was asking me if I'd ever seen the video of the Amazon warehouse and how stuff is selected. I saw you smile. You know what this is like, right? It's unbelievable. For somebody in the logistic business like you, isn't that a miracle? Yeah. Well, I think it's the technology at work.
Yeah. So when we talk about that, when we talk about the driver's list, do they go into the station all by themselves? Do they lock up? Do they plug in their own extension cord? What do they do?
It's all driverless, and we don't. We're at the stage of technology now where we don't need a person locked up in a cab in the front of the train pushing buttons at this point.
However, I must tell you, and there is concern in the community. And before the break, let's address part one of that, and that is, without a driver, who's going to guarantee the safety of the passengers? And I know this has been really handled to my satisfaction before, but what do you say to that question?
Well, first I would say that the actual driving of the train in this day and age is safer being driverless.
No human error, obviously.
Exactly. Now, the other nice thing is we don't necessarily reduce the staff, but we can redeploy the staff to move around and be more customer service agents, see what's going on in the trains, in the stations. So more of a customer service, eyes and ears type of thing rather than doing a function that we really don't need anymore.
But that being said, and by the way, I'm 100% in agreement with that. And only because, a computer is a little bit less emotional than most of us. So they're about to be, but what I am concerned about is safety from the standpoint of saying, okay, it's probably not going to be within your purview yet, but can you expect will there be security on the train all the time?
That's a very high priority.
Yeah.
We're going to have something like 2,000 cameras on this system. We're going to have people moving around within the trains, within the stations. And we're working very closely with the City Department of Transportation Services, with HPD on these very issues.
The reason why I said is this one guy said, if they're going to hire, they should hire my grandma because she's a tough lady and she would be like a perfect undercover security person. How is that addressed in some areas? Look, we know that sometimes not everybody getting on a train is a desirable train mate, that there are problems and all of that. How quickly can somebody respond to a train or a car that's having a problem?
Well, I would say the first thing is that we will have fare gates. So there's a paid zone and an unpaid zone in the stations. So that's the first place to monitor is making sure people pay their fare or use the smart card before they enter the system.
Okay, so it's traffic time. Speaking about that, less of it when you're on the train. At least you don't have to drive. Here's Tyzo O'Brien with an update on what's going on, and we'll be right back with Andy Robbins, CEO and Executive Director of HART, here on our Heartbeat Show. It's what happens every other Monday morning. Tell everybody. We just tweeted it out.
Have you got a question? Want the answer? It's right here and right now. Here's more of the Mike Buck Show on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
Okay, we're continuing our discussion, Heartbeat, every other Monday or so. We get together. Here's Andy Robbins. He's the Executive Director and CEO. We talked earlier in the program about the federal audit, and then he was telling me, well, there's a city one. We'll talk about that in a minute, too. But here's an interesting email. And I think this goes somehow towards what we were talking about when you're talking about Portland. But this one says, Mike, rail success is based on destination. Traffic is so different now when UH is out of session. Sacramento's light rail had high ridership due to the stops at the state and city government buildings and the colleges and university. I think, isn't that sort of the cornerstone? You got to figure, what are you trying to service with the rail system? Exactly who are you trying to get from point A to point B?
Well, I think here on Oahu, we have a unique situation because we have a corridor between the mountains and the ocean where the rail system is, where by 2030, 70% of Oahu's population will live, and most of the employment is in this corridor. So for a 20-mile system, when you compare it to other rail transit systems, we get a lot of bang for the buck here. We hit a lot of important destinations on the 20-mile line.
Does your personal experience also show that this thing everybody is alluding to, TOD, or transit-oriented development, does it give people, particularly young people, the ability to maybe kind of live near where they work and how to get to work and around, maybe without the luxury of a private vehicle?
Oh, I think without a doubt. And, you're already seeing some examples of TOD even before the rail system is opening in Kaka'ako, for example. And I know, many of those are higher end, but there's also smaller units that are being put in.
Yeah.
And then places like Kalihi, I think, Waipahu, these are going to be areas where you see more affordable housing, workforce housing starting to develop.
I do know that there's a lot of people that wanted to see the ability to expand and all of that. And I know that why worry about the ability to expand when you're worried about just getting the doors open? So let's switch hats back in the few remaining minutes we have to emphasize a little bit what you might expect to, or what this city audit is all about. And is it also going to be released in stages?
No, I think the city audit, the city auditor did an audit 2 years ago, and he followed up with a
recap or an
update. And there were some 16 recommendations from 2 years ago. We felt like we have addressed or even closed 14 of those. The auditor prefers to consider most of those open and they'll come in and work with us and look at our documentation and look at the kinds of steps that we've taken over the last 2 years.
But isn't it sort of interesting or calming for people to hear that your people expect that? In other words, it's an open book. They don't have to wheedle something out of you. They don't have to give you a court order to get this document. It's an open exchange. How does it work?
Right. Well, we really had tried our best to accommodate the auditors. They sat in our offices. They attended meetings. Mm-hmm. We have an electronic filing system, for example. We made some 36,000 documents, 36,000 available. We had some issues with the timeliness. Our people are working, on the project as well. Some lessons learned there for the next time. But I think that we did our best to make these files, this information available.
I do know that there were a few negative things that came out about the state report, and you must have had some either bumpy roads or some explaining or chit-chatting to do with some of the folks that want to take it personal. I mean, are you satisfied now that what you were able to glean from that your employees are feeling a little bit better and are a little bit happier?
I think so. I think the flurry of newspaper articles was a little hard to take in some ways, day after day for
you got to keep
2 or 3 weeks.
Keep running, yeah.
You got to keep running. But I think, when you look at it as a whole, you realize that there are helpful suggestions there. And this is really about us performing on behalf of the taxpayers, and we have to continuously improve as an organization.
Okay, now, when people like the HART board get this information, obviously the board is made up because of these are people that are helping to shape the way we're going. They also kind of control you, right? I mean, sort of. So they had some recommendations for you as far as this year is concerned. What were they? What did they say? Obviously, it's a vote of confidence. You're doing a good job, but what did they say that you should expect a little more of?
I think in terms of my communications efforts, just like this show, for example, getting the word out. Also, internal communications, whether that be with the board or with our staff. These are always areas of improvement. Yeah,
I saw a list that I hope is available somewhere of what has been done positively, the milestones that have made, the accomplishments have been made. If people want to just brush up on where is this HART thing, where can I find out more scoop, what's the best way to do it?
Well, we have our website, honolulutransit.org. We have e-blasts that we do. If you go to our website, you can sign up for a weekly e-blast, and we try to provide information that way.
Also, I do know that, the legislature opened up and everything else, and unfortunately we had this brouhaha, if you will, at the federal level where we shut down the government and good whacks of the government for a while. But they're now in session. And obviously a lot of the state lawmakers are going to be looking at HART relation because they're hearing it in their offices, right? What are some of the things that you can share with us so far with the opening of the ledge where we're looking at? What are some of the key things?
Well, first of all, I made the rounds during the opening day of the legislature, and generally speaking, I heard a lot of encouragement.
Did you eat some good food?
Project going. No, I didn't.
No. That's the only reason I go. How's the grub? Yeah.
But we generally hear, keep it going, keep the project moving forward. But I know there's concern about sea level rise, for example, and we believe we'll be in front of the legislature talking about that, but we have a good story to tell because we've been very proactive in that area. And
technology is technology, right? I mean, when you see something coming. But I think that's more importantly, and I know that this did not come out of the, your purview, but we had a scathing report about good and bad driving. And it didn't make Hawaii look so good, And I'm wondering if that was kind of a tool. The worst state in the country for drivers. God, that's the thing. Oh, I don't want to be on that list. That's a terrible list. But that's what happens. We are on some pretty bad lists about traffic.
Right. I guess I saw that article as well, and I think it has to do with just congestion and the cost of gasoline and these kind of things. But hopefully the rail system's going to help. It'll provide a mobility option for people. Maybe you don't need to have 2 or 3 cars. You can reduce the amount of car ownership. And then, the system, once it's in full opening, should take about 40,000 car trips off the road.
Well, just think just for a minute, if a family's got 3 vehicles, for whatever their reason, and this can provide the ability to take one of them away. Right. Whatever they were paying for that vehicle, which is probably, $500, $600, $800 a month for everybody, between insurance, payments on the car, gasoline. Exactly. I don't know how much it is, but it's got to be up there. That's like people getting a big raise.
And my family lived that when we were in the Bay Area. We only had one car because we lived near a rail station.
It's funny because my wife, is a Brit, now American. Of course, grew up as a Brit, and said that everybody rides everything there. That's just the way it is. And so people get here and they're so surprised. What do you mean? You don't have a train? Or if you do have a train, what, you don't ride the thing?
I think that's it. The options that should be available to people, whether it's a bus, the rail, bicycle, walking. That's the future, I believe, here on Oahu.
Well, I don't think it took a special report coming from the mainland to tell us how bad. I often tell people, and listen, if you're the city or the state, I'm sorry, but Hoftalen and King Street, I don't call it that anymore. I call it pothole. I work on the corner of pothole and steel plate, because that's kind of the way it is. But what I'm still thinking is, you got 21 stations coming up. We're going to run out of time, but I want people to know where they can go look at theirs, where they can see what it's going to be like, and where they can get more information.
Well, you can start out in Eva, East Kapolei, right by the Kroc Center. Yep. That's the first station.
Yep.
And then we have stations in Waipahu, for example, Leeward Community College, and so forth.
Hey, thank you so much, Andy, for being here. We'll see you again next time. That's the Heartbeat.